Thank you all for sharing your best practices. Good luck. Keep us up to date. Please, bottom line is file bug reports, make the platform better, get on the developer forums, and of course, raise awareness among yourself as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's spend a little bit of time talking about news. This is something where we can all chip in and talk about it. I know we've got Mike over here, who's basically our group security guru here. So we've got a couple more root vulnerabilities that have been exposed. One's been fixed. The other one, not yet. But the first one was the DYLD print to file. This was not out very long before Apple actually released OS 10.10.10.5, which did fix this problem. So it's not a vulnerability anymore, but it should be something that you definitely get your folks updated to the latest and greatest right now. Basically, all this really did. Oh, and by the way, it's not a threat in El Capitan. El Capitan, which has the system integrity protection right now, their brand new feature, I should say, is preventing a lot of these root vulnerabilities that are getting exposed right now. Anything to add to this one? I've got one more. I bet you know what it is.
You did. I couldn't have said it better.
Alrighty. So the other one was actually found by an 18-year-old developer. I believe he was from Italy, and he called it T-Pone. And there's something interesting about this, because not only is it another root vulnerability that allows you to own a Mac, but he decided that he would not give Apple time to fix it. He was going to go ahead and expose it right now. And his reasoning being, and this is probably what would be kind of interesting discussion right now, his reason being, he didn't want Apple to sit on this. He figured if Apple, if the public knew about it, Apple was going to have to fix it. Now think about the history that's happened just recently, where Apple has had a whole bunch of root pipe vulnerabilities, and they have decided that they're not patching anything earlier than Yosemite. Some of these root pipe vulnerabilities have been around since 10.6.8. And obviously, we can't really expect them to patch 10.6.8 or maybe even 10.6 or 10.7 or maybe even 10.8. But Apple's not going back any earlier than Yosemite. And all of us who have schools or enterprises where we rely on the old hardware, rely on the old operating systems, we can't upgrade yet, you're vulnerable right now. So he decided that before Apple released El Capitan, he was going to make sure that this exploit was known, so that they would patch Yosemite. Open for discussion. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm going to take the good things aside just for fun. Exposing evil or exposing things that are that he considers to be evil is a good thing. You know, transparency.
Mm-hmm.
You found a thing. Here's a thing, and what people do with it, sort of up to them. So I'm going to take the good side stance.
He actually was pretty smart. He either got lucky or he is a very good lawyer. No, seriously, they're cutting down the international law on exploits with all this hacking team and the sale of it. They're actually starting to prosecute it. And if he doesn't release it for free and publicize it, he's actually at legal risk if he tells anybody about it. So he actually, the landscape is actually changing, and this whole, don't publicly disclose things, give the company time. He was actually at legal risk between the time when he told Apple and he wasn't able. You're actually, a good look at the law is you're actually not allowed to do anything with it and tell anybody. You're at personal risk. And so this is actually, and again, this is an elegant. I mean, he released the source code on GitHub. Go look at it. It's beautiful. I mean, this guy's is like a Mozart with code.
So, and he posted
it.
that solution, and that's what protected him, correct?
Yes, because again, the law is there for arms trade. They're taking arms trade laws. I can't pronounce it. It's Wassenaar, whatever that. Instruments of war law. I'll give you a little link to it if someone that knows a lot more about the legality of it than me. You are actually like, wow, this is really smart. Like, kid had no choice. He could have told Apple that he couldn't have released this patch. But again, like you said, it's a huge cost, right?
Yeah.
There are businesses, there are Xserves, there are SANs, there's a lot of
equal
stuff.
risk for releasing a fix.
Yes.
Like you're at legal risk for performing CPR on somebody who's dying.
No, they're talking about exploits as weaponry. So that's the legal framework. Again, none of this is until it goes to a lawyer, until it goes to trial. Who knows what the law is? Nobody knows what the law is until it gets enforced. But
He's not at legal risk for posting the fix. He's
no lawyer.
It's for
no lawyer
posting
says
the
that you're gonna be
exploit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No lawyer says you're going to be at risk for posting this information publicly, giving it away.
Mhm.
You're at risk if you sell it.
Mhm.
You're at risk if you use it, if you gain from it, when it's not in the public domain. So it's kind of this odd twist of publish or perish. But anyhow, this again is it's not a remote exploit. It's not like you're open, but anything you run this printer installer, run this whatever, his code will latch on to anything. And so I can put that on anything and say, here, run this cute little program, and boom, I'm ruined. Yeah, I mean.
Scary.
Put that in self-service.
So there's the link to it right up there. Interestingly, he puts the exploit that he's written, and then right below it he puts his own patch. Just to kind of give you, it's like, you can go protect yourself. Here's what everybody else knows. So if you're go patch yourself, if you know how to read code. I have a little bit of a problem sometimes downloading, installing somebody's code that says I'll fix things. Microsoft has called me too many times about that. And there's also an interesting link at the bottom from Engadget about what they think, about this whole scenario. Is it a good thing? Did he do the right thing? Was it wise? Did he have no choice? It's up for debate.
I feel that Apple's aggressive release cycle for OS kind of opens up this for more because I don't feel they're giving each version enough time to test and to vet internally before it starts coming out, and then it's
And
catching.
again, some of these rootkits have been exposed since 10.6.8. That's an awfully long time for them
Yeah.
to fix it.
They've been out there since that long. Nobody's discovered them until just very recently. But yeah, Apple's decided they're not going to go back and patch some of the earlier stuff, which I can't blame any software developer for not wanting to go back and patch years old code that hasn't been supported in a while.
But the question is, when were they aware of it? You're not going to patch 10.6.8, but if they were aware of it at 10.7 or 10.8 even,
Yeah.
and they didn't, go back,
Nobody knows except Apple.
right.
And that's the real question here, is kind of like this exploit, was it out in the open for a long time and people were exploiting it and
Oh, like
just
the
nobody
hacker
knew about
teams.
it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it all goes into, it's like security philosophy. Are we going to like obscure this, or are we going to share this information and have it be fixed?
Or are you going to design your operating system where nobody can change it?
So if Apple ever makes a car, I'm going to use that line. I'm going to say, well, you didn't patch Mavericks, did you? So how am I going to know that this car will run in a year?
Let's go ahead and move on.
All right. So always near and dear to my heart, Office. So I gave a presentation back at PSU about Office getting released, and that was 2 days, or actually the day before they released Office 365 customers. Since then, they've also released Office 2016 to volume license customers. And unfortunately, the installer breaks. If you double click on the GUI, which I'm sure every single administrator just walks around to his Mac and logs in and double clicks on the GUI and runs it and installs it that way, you're absolutely fine. The licensing file gets installed correctly. But this is probably about the 5th time that I can think of since Office 2011, like version 14.2, that if you install the, if you run the installer through a command line, which is what Casper uses, which is what ARD uses, which is what most management systems are going to use, the licensing file gets trumped. And that's because the installer was written for somebody to double click on it. And they just basically ported over that same code to volume license saying, hey, we'll just put your serial number in here and call it done. Doesn't quite work that way.
Where does the license file go? Does it just try to write it somewhere? It's like, I can't do
It doesn't
that.
get a chance to write it.
Okay, so it never actually
Never
gets to
gets
that
there.
point.
It's still in the package. In fact, people, how many people are on Slack yet? Hopefully, get on Slack if you guys aren't there yet. But there's a group out there just for Office, which I think Brian started. You started that?
Not for the Office one.
Not for the Office. Somebody started a group out there, and I'm amazed at how fast it's grown. People have gone out there. They have figured out the problems. They've figured out workarounds. People are deconstructing the Office 2016 installer and recompiling it on behalf of Microsoft. Microsoft is definitely aware of all these problems, but some people are actually saying, you know, do they not know what they're doing? And my response, I know some of the Office guys, is they're not administrators. They honestly don't know how to administer Macs. They are developers. They don't know what's breaking. They don't know how we're going to deploy. They don't know Apple's tools. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just trying to kind of give a reason as to why things are happening. So has anybody tried deploying Office 2016 yet? Had any problems? Nobody yet?
Yeah, is anybody actually buying it? We're deploying it. How's it going? Good. It's, we have 365, so we not using a license file this time. We're just having users sign in with their 80 credentials to activate it. Because that's how the 365 licensing user base. So.
And we buy a seat note, right? Or is it all subscription? Is it only subscription?
You can buy them individually now too, I think, but our companies, we have a subscription for everybody, so I haven't looked into it really.
I know the day they released it, it was kind of like you're 365 and that's the only way you can get it. But I don't know if it was 365 volume license users or just any 365 user.
It started with Office 365 and then like we have a EES agreement for the college. So then it was like 3 weeks later we got access to it in the volume license service center.
Yeah.
I haven't checked the service center.
Yeah. Should be there. So, and
overall, the apps are a big improvement, though. I mean, the installer has got some bad feedback, but I think the apps are quite a big improvement over 2011.
This is still an issue? It hasn't been patched?
Not yet. Microsoft did release 15.13.1 or 3, I believe, which is supposed to have fixed it, but it didn't.
So is the OneNote version in the App Store the same as the OneNote version in 2016? Because we had people using it for the App Store version because it was free, and I'm like, oh, and now it's in Office?
Yeah,
That's just weird.
For the most part, it's the same.
And they're all 32-bit apps still, aren't they? At least when I installed the beta, it was 32-bit apps still.
In the year 2000, though.
Yeah.
They're very soon. In the year 2000.
Would you really want people opening documents larger than 2 gigabytes?
Oh man,
I don't want them creating documents that are 2 gigabytes.
PowerPoint? You bet.
It could happen.
It totally happens. Totally
Well,
happens.
speaking of 32, 64-bit, how long has Apple been pushing 64 bits? Because I had another
2003 is when the G5 came out.
instance with a vendor. They're like, oh, you got to have Java 6 to run this because we need a 32-bit version of Java. I'm like, they've been pushing this for like 10 years.
Snow leopard migrated kernel.
Okay.
It's really,
And I'm like-
that's the first 64.
And I'm like, well, El Capitan is the last one to run Java 6. You know, you're going to have to update it in a year.
Okay, very well be. I don't know what Apple's plans are for. I don't know that much about 32-bit and 64-bit architecture to say if 32-bit can always run. I don't think 16-bit could ever run on Windows anymore. I could be wrong. I would hope at some point Office changes, but I think architecturally they didn't have to, so they didn't. Next thing, we talked a lot about PSU Mac admins last time, and videos are posted. You can go out there, you can watch them, and I like to always total up the amount. They didn't get the all of the 1 day sessions, the full sessions, all recorded. I think there's only one out of about 4 that actually made it. I think they had some video recording problems there. But you take what they do have with everything else, you've got, I'd say 45, 50 hours of stuff to watch. And the way I like to look at it is it's probably about 2 months of your lunch hours. And then I liked this one, and we're actually doing it. Hi guys in Philadelphia. We're actually doing it just like what Philadelphia did. They broadcast their meetup a couple weeks ago in their Apple conference briefing center, just like ours. Anybody who's probably watching it is seeing the exact same setup right here, which is really cool. So anybody have any other kind of news to bring up that they'd like to talk about? All right, if not, then it's 6:30 right now. Let's take a break till 6:50, and then we'll get started on the main presentation and finish up. Let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm William Smith. I happen to be like emceeing the whole thing today, so sorry I'm kind of monopolizing everything. Normally that doesn't happen. But let's talk about accessing directory services from the command line. And how many folks here are using Active Directory, Open Directory? Almost everybody here. Good. So this is a presentation that I wrote or put together for Mac IT about 1.5 years ago. I've spoken at Mac IT a few times, and this was kind of near and dear to my heart because one of the things that I did years and years ago was I put together a script that helped people set up Exchange accounts in Outlook. And as part of updating that script over time, I had to learn some things about pulling stuff from Active Directory. And typically, the only way you're going to be able to do that programmatically is through the command line. So that's why I did this presentation about accessing directory services from the command line. All right, so we're going to be discussing 5 different command line tools. They're very simple to use. You just have to know the syntax a little bit. In fact, I'm hoping that anybody who goes back can at least implement one of these that I'll be showing you in a little while without even having to write anything down tonight. It's DSCL. But we'll be talking about dsconfig AD and dsconfig LDAP. dsconfig AD is for manipulating and working with Active Directory bindings on your Mac, and dsconfig LDAP is for Open Directory. You could actually probably use that for other things. I haven't tried eDirectory or any kind of other LDAP, but that should be the command line that helps to manage those as well. Then we'll also be talking about DSCL. DSCL is the Directory Services Command Line tool. This is what lets us look at our directory services and get information out of it. We'll be looking at DSEdit Group that lets us edit groups, again, not in the directory, but on your computer. And then DSMemberUtil, which is kind of handy to know if somebody is actually a member of a group. You need to know if they're a member in order to be able to do something possibly. All right, so why use a directory service? Directory services are fantastic because they're one place for updating information such as names and passwords, but they're also one place where you can go to disable accounts. If you have all of your systems tied into a directory service, you go to one place, disable the account. If somebody leaves, everything is disabled. It's also great for network resources such as servers and printers and storing information about databases and websites. They can store information about computer resources, any kind of administrator privileges or remote access. You can even store user information, which is probably what we take advantage of more than anything. First name, last name, email address, office, phone number, anything you need to know about a user. If you have your directory populated with that information, you can pull it out and use it in some interesting ways. And then finally, one of the other reasons you would ever have a directory is to store things about stuff that is on your network, like printers. Active Directory, for the longest time, has given users the ability to search for a printer and be able to connect to it through Windows computers. You can pretty much do the same thing with any kind of directory service. It just happens to be Microsoft made it pretty easy with Active Directory. All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is LDAP. LDAP is Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. This is what most services are using. This is the only thing that we're going to really be working with is LDAP throughout this whole thing. It's just pretty much the protocol for being able to talk to a directory service across a network. And the most common LDAP servers are Active Directory and Open Directory, Microsoft and Apple, or at least in a Mac environment, the common ones. So first thing I want to talk about is binding. And binding is the process of telling a computer to use a directory service. All right, so let's talk about binding to Active Directory first. Now, how many folks here have ever used the directory utility? Most everybody. Perfect. So the directory utility is the GUI version that we would use to bind to a directory. You'll find this application actually listed in the system folder, library folder, core services, applications. It's kind of buried. There's other ways you can get to it, but that's where it lives. You don't really need to use it that many times. If you're in a big environment, chances are you don't want to use this all the time. This is where command line comes in really, really handy. And by the way, I mentioned this lives in System Library Core Services. Side note, I love what the Jamf folks say about this. That is the coolest folder on OS X. Everything that you can do that's fun on a computer is in that folder, System Library Core Services. If we were to go through the GUI and we were to actually join a Mac to Active Directory, there's only two pieces of information we really need about the computer. And I'm not talking about the name and the password for binding, but I'm actually talking about what we would need is the Active Directory domain name, and then a name for our computer or its ID. Beyond that, everything else you can leave at the default, like what I have here. This is the way it would look if you opened it right up. Now, if we were to go through the whole step, we would click on the second tab. We would go to mappings. Unless you're an Active Directory guru and you're doing some really, really strange things in your network, ignore that tab. And then finally, under administration, how many people take advantage of this second box where it says allow administration by? Good. A lot of people don't. I'm really surprised. Basically, this gives you the ability to specify an LDAP group in Active Directory, one or more LDAP groups, and anybody who signs into your Mac that's a member of that group is an administrator on your Mac. It doesn't work off network. They have to be talking to Active Directory at the time. But it's one of the few features that I'm surprised a lot of people don't take advantage of. And then when we click the bind button, the next thing that would happen is it says, where do you want to put this Active Directory object for the computer? And in Active Directory, by default, it goes into a computer's container. Here, you can actually specify a different OU in Active Directory to put that computer object. Some people decide that they want to go ahead and let it default to computers, and then they will, into the computer's container. Then they will move it later in Active Directory. Why? When you can just do it right here. And then finally, when you click bind, everything spins a little bit, and then at this point you should see the unbind button, and that's what tells you that your Mac has joined Active Directory. So, all right, so let's see what this looks like in the GUI. So the command line tool to bind a Mac to Active Directory is called dsconfig AD, and note the AD in the name. And if you ever have to refer to any of these tools that I'm talking about, I'll do what practically everybody else will say: go read the manual. You can type in man space dsconfig AD, and you're going to see a whole bunch of information that tells you how to use it. I'm going to show you just some very simple stuff that will probably take care of 90% of your needs here. So let's look at this side by side. On the left side, I'm showing you the command line. On the right side, I'm showing you the GUI equivalent. All right, so first thing, you have to do a sudo, super user do. This, you have to be an administrator on a Mac in order to be able to join it to a directory server. And then the command is dsconfig. So sudo dsconfig, and then we start adding some extra switches here. -add. I want to add this computer to a domain, and in my case, my domain name, my Active Directory domain name, is called talkingmoose.pbt for private. And then on top of that, I'm going to also say, here's my computer name, and it's TMI for Talking Moose Industries Mac 1. So sudo join my computer named TMI1 or TMI Mac 1 to my talkingmoose.private domain. Now let's add a little bit more to that. Remember when I was telling you about those groups underneath the administration tab? This is where in that same command line instruction, you can say, I want to add these LDAP groups from Active Directory to be administrative groups on this Mac. So in this case, I just add the -groups switch, and then I can give one or more LDAP groups. And all I have to do is separate them by a comma, put them in quotes if they have spaces in the name. So in this case, I've got my New York City desktop admins, and then also my sales developers as 2 groups from Active Directory that would be administrators on this Mac. And then remember, after that, in the GUI, we would click the bind button, and then this window pops up. So what it's asking us for now is username. Who is the username of an Active Directory setup that is allowed to join any computer to Active Directory? It's not a username on the computer at this point. We're saying who is the username in Active Directory that has privileges to go ahead and join devices to Active Directory. You would then also have to add the password. This is the one part that's you really want to have either a management system or a very good privacy screen, because you do have to type this password in plain text. Casper basically does this, but they encrypt all the information, so nobody ever sees it happen. But the password is actually getting passed through just like this. And then you give the password here. I've got ABC123. And then after that, you'll notice that I'm specifying the OU right here as the last argument to that whole command. Now, everything that we've done in the GUI, clicking through all those screens, this is pretty much the entire line to do the exact same thing. So again, super user, you have to be an administrator on the Mac. You're saying, I want to use dsconfig AD. I want to add this computer to the talkingmoose.private domain. Here's the computer's name. Here are the groups that will be administrators. Here's the username and the password to join it to Active Directory. And then finally, here's the OU to actually put it into Active Directory, or to place it into. All you have to do at that point is hit return. It asks for your password on the computer. And then essentially, you get this message that says settings changed successfully. At that point, you would see this over here in the GUI. If you were to open up directory utility, it would say unbind which is typically the best sign showing you that a Mac is bound to Active Directory. So, any questions about that?
What if you don't get settings changed successfully?
Then something went wrong. Probably you don't have permissions to write into the OU. You might be specifying something where you don't have enough administrative credentials to do that. Or maybe you've done a typo, like leaving out a quote or something.
I was going to ask, if you mistyped a group or an OU, will you get any feedback as to where that problem was?
Not for those two. That's a great question. If I were to actually specify, let's say instead of NYC desktop admins, let's say I accidentally type in NIC desktop admins, it'll still let me do this. It's not going out to Active Directory and saying, is there a New York City desktop admins? Let's verify it first. It's not doing any kind of pre-verification. So if you mistype something as far as the LDAP group and it doesn't work, go look for typos, but it's not going to tell you.
But so you're saying that it's not going to verify. So if I did type in NIC desktop admins, would it say settings changed successfully?
Yes.
It would bind, but
it would bind, but
so the administration, there's just going to be a problem when an NYC desktop admin tries to log in to control that.
Exactly. Like I said, there's only two pieces of information you have to have in order to bind correctly, and that's the Active Directory domain and a computer name. And that could be anything. It could even be a computer object with the same name that already exists in Active Directory. You don't want that, but it's possible. So that's a great observation to bring up. There is very little error checking when it comes to running this command, so you have to make sure that you're running it correctly. And that's where something like Casper or Remote Desktop with the send Unix command comes in really handy, so you can repeatedly do this correctly.
I don't know if this is in server 2012 anymore, but it used to be if there was a time difference between the Windows server and the Mac, you would get a failed bind.
Yeah. That's definitely still there.
That's always a problem.
Yep, 5 minutes, plus or minus 5 minutes.
In fact, that extends to Apple. We found some problems whenever we were trying to do some stuff with the device enrollment program. We found that our test box had drifted by days and then also hours. So it's not just an Active Directory thing. That's almost a system-wide or an industry-wide security setting anymore.
Wasn't it tied with Kerberos settings?
What's that?
Isn't that a part of the Kerberos
the ticket
stuff to 5 minutes plus or minus?
I thought it was something like that with the ticketing. There's a definite time issue with the Kerberos, and I think that has something to do with it.
That would make sense.
One more question. In your groups, you had mentioned separating by a comma, and then including anything with spaces within parentheses.
Within quotes.
With quotes.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you have just a single set of quotes around both groups? Wouldn't you need to have NYC desktop admins close quotes?
No.
Okay.
It would probably work if you separated them.
Okay.
But you don't have to. It'll take it as one long string.
Okay.
All right.
The GUI, if the computer ID already exists, it tells you it already exists. Do you want to join the ad?
It asks if you want to join it.
Does that same thing happen in, what happens in the terminal?
Here, I don't think I think you have the option of doing, I believe it's a -F switch to say force. But I can't remember what happens if you don't force it, if you still get that. I don't know if you automatically join it if you don't force it, or if it balks and says, sorry, I can't do it. Been a while. So let's look and see what happens kind of behind the scenes outside of the GUI after all this has happened here. One of the ways that you can verify that your Mac has been bound to Active Directory is if you go to System Preferences and open up Users and Groups. The most obvious way to tell that a machine has been bound to any directory system is to look at the network account server there at the bottom. You'll see a green dot, and it'll give you, in this case, it's giving us the NetBIOS domain name. It's not giving us the Active Directory name. I don't know why. But it is showing us that, yes, I am bound to a directory service here. And if we were to go from the Mac over to Active Directory, what we would see here is that the machine, I don't know if you can necessarily see it very well, but the machine did actually get placed into the New York City OU, into the sales OU, and here it is, the computer name, and it's got the machine name that we gave it during the binding. The machine name during binding does not have to be the same as the computer name. So we're already in trouble. A Mac can have 3 different names to begin with. And it could actually have a 4th name in Active Directory if you so choose. But it shows up there, and what's even cooler about that, I wish I put a screenshot of it. If I were to double click on that computer record and open it up and start looking at its properties, it does say this is an OS X machine.
Also on the properties, there's a manage by tab, so you can set a manager and they have admin rights then too. So like on
I haven't tried that. That's cool.
I do that quite a bit because there's some faculty members that get special privileges. So I just set them as a mobile account, set them as the manager of that object, and then they can be admin on the machine.
Very cool. That I didn't know. I've never gone backwards that way before.
It doesn't work on Windows machines, but it works for the Macs.
Is that like the groups where it only works when they're connected to the domain?
No, it works. I have it set on that way on my own laptop, and I can be an admin at home with a mobile account.
Oh, with the mobile account.
Yep.
That would make sense.
Or, you know, if they're on the network all the time, obviously, it works that way as well.
Okay. So that's Active Directory. Let's talk about binding to Open Directory. It's very similar, very similar process. So if we were to bind using the GUI on Open Directory, what we would do is go into System Preferences, Users and Groups, and then we would click on the login options down in the lower left-hand corner. When we do that, then we have the button over here that says Join. This is where we earlier saw the green dot and talking moose. So if you see Join, again, that's a clear sign that the machine is not bound to any kind of directory system. So we would go ahead and click Join. And at this point, all we really need to do is type in an Open Directory master or Open Directory replica for our Open Directory system. So we'd be putting a server name in here. And that's pretty much all you have to do for Open Directory. It's very simple. When you click OK, it may ask you if you want to trust the server. If you don't have certificates set up ahead of time, then you're going to probably have to trust. It's not a bad thing. You're giving authentication because you're the administrator right now. You can click trust, and everything is perfectly valid. And afterward, we see the same thing if we come back, if we stay in the same place. In this case, instead of showing us the NetBIOS domain from Active Directory, it's just showing us the Open Directory server that we're joined to. Very simple compared to Active Directory binding. All right, so that's dsconfig AD, that's dsconfig LDAP. Yeah, LDAP. And if you need to see more about stuff, you can always do man dsconfig LDAP. All right. So that's a GUI way of doing it. Here's the command line way of doing it. On the left side, I've got the command line. On the right side, I'm showing the same procedure that I did in the GUI. We start off by saying sudo, and in this case, we say dsconfig LDAP. We do a -add, just like Active Directory. We give the name of the Open Directory server. Add a little bit more to this, the -xn. The -x is a switch that says connect only over SSL, which is good. The -n is saying install any certificates if necessary. That's the equivalent of clicking trust. And then when you hit return, it asks you for your password. Again, you have to be an administrator on your Mac to be able to bind to any directory system. And then you're done. You have the green dot show up, and then you see the name of the server there. So that's dsconfig ld, AD, dsconfig ldap, connecting to a Mac or Windows server. Any questions about binding? All right. So now what? Once you bound a machine to a computer, what good is it? Here's some ideas. You get the centralized logins that I was telling you about. You're able to finally take advantage of the centralized database of usernames and passwords. The most obvious advantage of that is you don't have to go around as an administrator and type in people's names and passwords ahead of time and tell them what the password is. If they've already joined, if they've already been using Active Directory or email, they know their password. They can log into any computer. You can also access the company directory. This works with Active Directory as well. So when you've joined a Mac to Active Directory, you can open up the contacts window. It will not give you a browse list. It won't show you all of a sudden everybody that's in Active Directory, but it will let you search. And typically, I think after about 3 characters, it starts pulling a match. And so if I were to type in SMI, I would start seeing all the Smiths or all the Smittens or all the other Smiths out there. So company directory, another reason why you want to bind to things. Your Mac is going to actually use the display name attribute from your directory to show you nice little things such as what you would see under the Apple menu. I can say log out Martin Moose. So let's, we're still in Open Directory at this point. Let's start browsing Open Directory. Let's see what we can see through the command line. And this is where we start using the Directory Services command line tool, or DSCL for short. Again, if you're not sure how to use this, you can always go back to the man page and it will show you a whole bunch of stuff. One of the things I like doing, I don't think I showed it here, but in some cases you can actually type help. And help gives you a lot better verbiage than what you would get when you start doing man. I think I can show you that in just a little bit. All right. We're starting at a terminal. You just open up a window, and you're at your prompt. Here's the one thing I want you to know to take back with you. And all you have to do is type in DSCL. Just remember DSCL, and then hit return. When you do that, you're going into interactive mode. And so interactive mode is what lets you go up and down in the directory. So a directory structure, if you've ever looked at Active Directory or even Open Directory, is like a folder structure. So how many folks here are familiar with terminal and browsing folders? Most everybody here. What's the command you would use if you wanted to show the list of contents of the folder that you're currently in? LS. So while you're in DSCL's interactive mode, you can type in LS and hit return. And by default, it's going to show you this. You'll notice right up here, I've got LDAP v3. That's what says this is Open Directory. So that's what we're interested in seeing. It'll look a little bit different for Active Directory, but LDAP v3 is what we're interested in here. Now again, if we were to start browsing, what would be the command that we would use to go into LDAP v3? CD for change directory. So we're going to CD into LDAP v3, and we're going to hit return. All right, so we're in there. And again, we want to see what's in that directory. We type ls again, hit return. All right, it's showing us something that we've seen before. This is the server that we joined. And we're just going to keep repeating this process. We're going to keep listing, see what we see. If we find something interesting, we're going to change directory into it, and then we'll see how far we get. So I'm going to cd into the Open Directory server. I've got my prompt again. I'm going to list. And now I see a whole bunch of stuff. Most of this is not going to be useful to you. You can get in there, you can poke around, you can look. Can you really manipulate it? Not really. But the stuff that you're really interested in are the two items, which are groups and users. You'll see users there at the bottom. Everything is alphabetical. Let's look at groups first. So again, we're going to cd, we're going to change directory into that groups folder, and it gives us our prompt. Now let's look at the contents of this groups node. We list, and now we see things that look a little bit more interesting. We have an accounting group, we have our admin group, we have marketing group, sales. You can pretty much guarantee that Apple by default is not putting accounting or sales or group names like that. Those come from what you've already put in. So you know you're already kind of in familiar territory. And if we were to open up the server application and we go to look at groups, we see the same thing. Now through the command line, we're seeing a few extra things, such as the com.apple, limited admin, and work group. Actually, we see the work group here too. The command line will show you a few extra things, but for the most part, what you see in the command line here, just by browsing using DSCL, is the same thing that you would see here in the server group window. All right, so we've seen some groups that we've created in the server app. Not all the groups are there. This is, again, just Apple being protective of us so that we don't see things in the server GUI that we're not supposed to really be touching. But let's take a look at the work group object that we saw in that groups node. And the way we do that is a new term. We're not going to list it. We're not going to change directory into it. We want to read the work group. We want to find out what is interesting about this work group. It's the same thing as double-clicking work group in the server GUI. And when you say read work group, it gives us back a whole bunch of information. All right, so that's a lot to look at. I'm going to highlight a few properties here for you. If you look at the Apple Meta record name, you'll notice that this is actually, I believe, the distinguished name. If you're ever in Active Directory or LDAP, any type of LDAP, the distinguished name is basically the full name to get to the path of whatever you're looking at. That could be handy if you're ever doing some scripting, if you have to pull some information out for that. What's probably more interesting, though, is the next line there where it says member. It's actually showing you the members of this group. So my members are M. Moose, R. Wally, C. Griswold. That's all the members that are in there. And then finally, that last line that I've highlighted, the primary group ID. As we all know, every group, every user has a unique ID. This is how you would find that unique ID. All right. So that returns a lot of the information about the group, and each line is a property of work group. What if we only wanted to get the member property? So in other words, I don't want to list everything here and then have to read through it. I just want to see member. So again, I would say read work group, but now I say what property name I want to find. And remember, let's go back here. I'm looking for member. The property is there to the left of the colon, member. I'm going to say read work group and show me just the member property. And that's how I can start filtering out all of that information and getting to just what I want to see. All right, let's look at the same thing with users now. We're still in DSCL, and we're still inside the groups folder, in a sense. Just like browsing any kind of folder, we want to go up, and we can do a CD. what's the CD term to go up? It's dot dot forward slash. And in this case, I'm going to immediately switch into the users group. Are folks here familiar with doing change directory with the dot dot and the slash and going somewhere else, being able to browse up and down this way? All right. So again, I'm just doing CD. If I wanted to go up one level, I would just do CD dot dot. In this case, I'm taking a shortcut. I'm going straight into users now. And then just like browsing a folder structure on a computer, we're going to start listing the contents, type ls. All right, so those are the members or users of my server. C. Griswold, duradmin, Moose, Arwally, and you'll see another one there that we normally wouldn't, which is some sort of VPN user. If we look at this side by side with server, you'll notice the VPN user is not showing up here. Again, it's Apple trying to protect us from getting into things we really shouldn't be easily accessing, but you can still see it through the command line. All right, let's look at the properties for Moose. And again, if you just say read and you type in user record, you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff. But let's look at some of the stuff which is probably a little bit more interesting. I've got that second line that's highlighted. I can pull back the email address. And I can see the email address is mmoose@talkingmoose.private. I can pull back the first name, Martin. I can pull back the second name, Moose. I can pull back his home folder path. I can get the primary group ID. I can get the real name, which in Windows speak would be called a display name. Or in actually most systems it would be called a display name. So you don't necessarily have to pull back last name and first name to get a full name. That's what real name is. And then what if we wanted to get just the email address for Martin Moose? All we have to do is append the name of that property to the end of our line here. So we're going to say read mmoose and give me just the email address. Note that that is a capital E and a capital M. This is case sensitive, so if you accidentally type a lowercase m, it's not going to find it. It has to be exactly as you would see it as you're browsing.
You can't do tab to complete for those attributes, can you?
No. I don't think so for those, no. It'd be nice.
Yeah. Tab completion is kind of wonky in the DSCL, I found.
I've never tried it, to be honest. Other than whenever I'm trying to type out the whole Active Directory all users part that we'll see later. Then it comes in handy. And here I am, I'm pulling back just the email address. This is one of those parts of my script for setting up Exchange accounts that I use a lot because we want to get the right email address. We don't want to have to try to put together a first name and a last name or some sort of special way of doing things when I can go actually read the real thing and know it's right from the directory. All right. And we can even specify multiple properties to come back. So instead of just reading mmoose and bringing back just the email address, I can read mmoose, bring back the email address, bring back the first name, and bring back the last name. And it'll show me all three of those. So you can make one query out to your directory and have all the attributes in one line that you want to pull back and bring it all back at once, which is more efficient than going out one by one saying, show me email address, or show me first name, or show me last name, which is even more efficient than bringing back the entire list of stuff and trying to parse it using awk or sed. So make the tool work for you. All right, so that's Open Directory. Let's browse Active Directory. It's very, very similar. Again, we start off in a brand new terminal window. All we have to do is type in DSCL. We go into interactive mode. And then at that point, we just start browsing. Now, things are going to look a little bit different here. If we say ls to list, we don't have the LDAP v3 this time. It actually says Active Directory. You look at that, and then you know what type of system you're connected to. Everything else is pretty much the same, though. So all we have to do is change directory into Active Directory, and then we list. Here we're looking at our NetBIOS domain name. It's actually possible to use a script to pull that if you ever need to know what that particular domain name is. That's not the Active Directory domain name, it's NetBIOS. There's a difference. Typically, if you're ever in an environment where you have to specify the domain name, that's the part that goes before the backslash. All right, so let's change directory into the NetBIOS domain, Talking Moose. And we're going to list again. And okay, it's showing us something more. We're going deeper and deeper without getting anywhere. This is all domains. So we need to change directory into all domains and list. Finally, we're seeing stuff that we recognize. And again, the two parts that we're probably interested in are users and groups. We're going to list groups. And again, the groups are listed using that domain name / group name nomenclature. If we want to look at something that's kind of interesting, here we've got marketing developers, we've got our New York City desktop admins, so we can start browsing those groups. Let's list all the users this time. I've got my C. Griswold guest KRBGT, something we normally don't see, but again, this is what you would see if you're looking at Active Directory, if you're looking at the GUI version of Active Directory. Let's read mmoose to get its properties, and you'll notice I'm doing something here a little bit different. I'm actually saying I'm in all domains right here. I haven't gone any deeper than that. But what I'm doing is I'm saying read this property, which is inside that folder. I can put a full path in here just like I would in the terminal looking at anything. And it would still get me everything there, but I would still remain in that working directory for all domains. So when we pull stuff back, this is just a subset. I've truncated this a lot. This is just a subset of what we would actually see if we do pull stuff back from it. Let's see. Where is it? The very last item, SAM account name. That is Active Directory's term for username, short name. Some of the other things that you can also see in here. Where is it? Last logon time. How many times you've logged in? The very first item is interesting. When the account expires. As typical in most directory systems, accounts are going to expire after, say, 90 days, and you have to reset your password. Or I take it back. In this case, the account expiring would be for somebody who's temporary. This is not password change, but this is for when you've got somebody who will be here through the end of September, and you want that account to just automatically expire. This is where you could actually, if you could read that number, and I'm sure there's a formula for doing so, you could find out the date when this account no longer will work.
There's an epoch converter site that'll convert 18-digit LDAP timestamps.
Is that epoch time? Yeah. I didn't look. So if you were to type that in real quick, can you read that?
Yeah, the last logon, or?
Yeah, the very top line. So the 92233.
Oh, 922, okay. 92233 72036. That's a lot of pressure right now.
Yeah.
5477.
I think you could do like a date-r and probably paste that in. You might get something useful.
You could probably just make it up. They're never going to know.
Google will translate that for you because I've done that many times.
Oh, epoch time?
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sure, Wolfram Alpha would too.
Giving us anything interesting?
It says that I'm 1 digit over. That doesn't make sense.
Oopsie. 922-33720-368-5477-5807.
Yeah, doesn't like that. It stops at 80 and it tells me that it's going to expire the 9th of October in 5423. Oh, that's right somehow.
That's 19 digits.
Well,
Yeah.
that could actually be true because I don't think I would have set this account to ever expire. So I wouldn't be. I don't think 54 is reasonable, but I wouldn't be surprised at something ridiculously high. Try that same number in date-r in terminal. I don't know if that'll give it to us or not.
Digits, nice. Did you say that was 19 digits? Okay. And for LDAP timestamps, they're supposed to be 18 digit.
Okay. It's just
convertible back.
doing a herp derp.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know why. It's translatable.
I'll have to go home and play on my domain controller tonight and find out.
Yeah.
Everybody's homework assignment.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you pull an LDIF in this tool? You know what I'm talking about?
So you're talking like seeing what?
So like on Windows,
files are open?
on Windows you do I can't. It's like LDI.
Oh yeah. So
command,
for importing
or
and
you can
exporting
use
directory
like Apache
information.
Directory Studio to pull an LDIF and it'll dump that user info in there, like for troubleshooting.
Oh, that's fine.
Active Directory.
Oh,
Can you
yeah.
hardly get an
Anything
equivalent?
else?
I don't know if LDIF is Windows only or if it's a.
I don't know. Well, you can pull an LDIF on Apache Directory Studio
can.
on OS 10.
Okay.
That's how I usually do it. Or you can go to Windows Server and do like a shell command. But
I bet
a lot of this
interchange
stuff is
format,
the
that's what it
same.
is. LDAP interchange format or something like that. I don't know, but I bet if it's not LDIP, it's something.
Right.
Oh. That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
That's a specific hex value that says the account never expires.
Right. Yep. It's counting the number of seconds since the start of the Unix epoch. Corresponding to a point in time 292 billion years from now.
Oh wow. That's longer than the
good for a while.
The long now, folks.
That would have been 19 bits, not 18. Okay.
We're still using Active Directory then.
Oh.
It's 106 trillion days in seconds.
So how many?
106 trillion days in seconds. 106, 751,991,167,301 days in seconds.
So you're good.
Likely longer than our lives. In all,
Maybe.
possible chances I can foresee.
Anybody familiar with the clock at the long now?
Mm-hmm.
And
10,000 years, right?
10,000 years exactly. So anybody who's a member of that society, have you seen how they write their years? We write it as 2015. They write it as 2015 because that's 10,000 year format.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. What are we talking about here? That was fun. So again, if I wanted to, I can I can pull out just the properties that I want and get those values. All I have to do is read my mmoose record and then say what I want out of it. Email address, again, in this case, it's also capital E, capital M, and then real name and state. If I do that, then I get my email address, real name on a separate line, mmoose because it's got a space in it, and then state. Really? I'm surprised. I don't understand why you use that state. And then finally, let's read a computer object to see what it reveals. I don't know if you noticed that, but there were users groups. There were also computers in that list. I can actually say read computers and look at my TMI Mac1 $, which is the name of the record in this case. And lo and behold, I see things like OS 10 operating system version. It says Mac OS 10. I don't know if this is back in the day when before Apple named it OS 10, or if Active Directory is still identifying this Mac OS 10. But I can actually pull from Active Directory information about my Macs. Kind of fun. All right, so let's talk about nested groups. We can put Active Directory groups into local computer groups for administrative purposes. That's what we were seeing when we were looking at that binding window, when we were actually saying New York City desktop admins. That was actually putting that Active Directory group into a local group on the Mac in order to be able to give that group administrative privileges. All right, so let's start off with DSCL in interactive mode again, and we'll list the directory nodes doing ls. This time we're going to browse the local computer node, not the Active Directory computer node. So local being on the computer that I'm on right now. I say list local. It shows me default is inside. All right. So let's change directory to local default. There I am. Let's see what's inside default. And now I see a whole bunch of things, including some groups and users. Let's explore some of this stuff here. Let's change into groups. We'll CD into groups. And again, we're using DSCL to look in local groups on the computer itself. We're going to list. And we see a whole bunch of stuff. I've actually put an ellipsis there at the bottom because this is just going to run off the screen. There's so many groups on a Mac. But let's look at that very top one, admin. So we're going to read the admin group. And it's going to pull back all this interesting stuff. Kind of gobbledygook if you think about it, but it's not really. These are UIDs. These are things that we should be getting familiar with, not necessarily learning what they are, but know what they are. So you'll notice that we have in the nested groups property right here, I've got two big, long, herky strings of numbers, but there's only two there. Any idea of what those are?
New York City admin.
Exactly. Those are the UIDs of those groups. How do we know this? We're looking at those right there. I can run a search against Active Directory. And again, I'm inside DSCL. So this is a search command inside DSCL. It's part of the command where I can say search, and I'm giving the full path. So Active Directory, Talking Moose, all domains, groups, and then I'm looking at the generated UID. Actually, those aren't UID, they're generated UIDs, GUIDs. And I'm going to specify this second one right here. I'm just copying it and I'm pasting it right here at the end. I want to look inside Active Directory and say, what is this group? And when I do that, you'll notice it comes back with Talking Moose / you're actually right on the money, New York City desktop admins. So it's not a clean way of being able to find it, but if you're using a script or something, you can do it very, very easily. Any questions about that? This will all be posted later, so you'll have this to refer to later if you're interested in anything I'm talking about. And finally, that's it right there. Desktop admins corresponds to that big GUID up there. All right. So how can we add another group? So we've got desktop admins, we've got this other, the second group. How do we add a third group by command line? This is where we end up using another command, dsedit group. Of course, you can always do man, and you will see the man page for dsedit group to get more information. Let's look at it again through the command line. Brand new terminal window. We're going to this time not use DSCL. Remember, this is a completely different command. So we do sudo dsedit group. An option, that's what the -o is. We're going to edit. I'm sorry, operation, not option. The operation is we're going to edit something. Oh,
Sorry,
yes, go
I have a
ahead.
question.
Yes.
Why do you need a sudo if the directory is on a different server than the machine?
That's a good question. I might have actually typed that, not realizing that I don't need that.
Some of those commands do
Good
need
question.
the sudo, but some don't.
I don't remember.
I had to
Might be
use
just by
sudo
pure
when
habit
I
that you
just
do
did
it.
that.
I could have done it just by habit, as he actually said.
DSCL should not need it, right?
DSCL shouldn't need
Should
it.
not need it.
But that
But,
means any user could traverse
Oh.
your entire directory
Yeah.
and sniff around.
Well, no, not any user. Any member of Active Directory can. Any member of Active Directory
That's already logged in.
of any directory service by default has privileges to browse.
So
Now I remember the reason I'm saying sudo here is because I'm getting ready to edit a local group.
Okay.
God, you're making me think. All right. So what we were just talking about here, did everybody understand what I just said there? If you're a member already of your entire company, you have of your company, you have the ability to look at all the contents of Active Directory or Open Directory by default. I'm not saying that an administrator can't change that, but by default, you have the ability to browse without being an administrator. That's a good thing. You wouldn't be able to browse and use your contacts list or something like
Directory
that. if you
services, you mentioned, is available as soon as you're bound.
Yeah, it's not a, it shouldn't be full of secure, confidential information. It can be. I mean, if you want to get a list of everything, yeah, that's great. But one at a time, it shouldn't really be that confidential. And then again, the other reason I'm using the sudo here is because we're getting ready to edit a local group here. So ds-edit group, the operation is I'm going to edit. And then the -A means add. And in this case, I'm getting ready to add just rwally from Active Directory into my local admins group. Just a user. I'm not nesting a group. I'm just nesting a user in this case. Does that make sense? What I'm doing? I'm just giving rwally administrative privileges.
When you say add, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You just type in rwally. It's just
It
reading. It knows, and that's my question: is how does it know that it's what happens if you have a group named rwally or something, which you could have?
That's what this next
Okay.
This next
I'll shut
option
up.
here is. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yes. You need power. There you go.
Otherwise, our stream will end.
We're that far done according to my presentation notes here. So in this case, very good question. How does he know? How does ds-edit group know that this is a user, not a group? We specify this is a user. Type is user. Otherwise, I could have done type is group. And where do I want to add this user? I want to add it to admin, because this is ds-edit group. It already knows that this last part of the command is a group, so the group admin. I hit return. I have to type my password in, and done. That's pretty much all we have for that. So at this point, rwally could log in, first time to the computer ever, and rwally is an administrator on that Mac. Okay, so ds-edit group doesn't have an interactive mode like DSCL, but if you run, let's see, runs a normal command line prompt. So let's add an Active Directory user to a computer's local admin group, which we've already done. Verify already. So that's what I'm talking about. My notes are all screwed up. How do we know this worked? How do we know that rwally actually made it into that group? There is another command that we can use, or another set of commands we can use with ds-edit group. It's called check member. Check member is what lets us say, is such and such person, user, a member of such and such group. So we're going to verify rwally is a member of the local admins group. We hit return, and it very nicely in plain English says, yes, rwally is a member of admin. What about C. Griswold? No. So using a DS Edit group, you can check membership. And then, let's see, data set report. And again, just as we were able to add a user, we can add an entire group here. In this case, I'm actually saying -T group instead of -T user. Put in the password, you get no feedback whatsoever. But then, if C. Griswold is a member of corporate desktop admins, and we do a check membership again, now C. Griswold is a member. Again, just all coming through command line.
I found that doesn't always work.
Depends on how deep your nested groups are,
Yeah.
probably. That's what you ran into a bit,
I had
right?
to hunt down some group that had admin access, but it wouldn't show membership of them.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Can you just do an ID lookup?
In
Internal, just
sure.
ID and then
Oh,
using this contact directory
probably.
should output.
It wouldn't show the admin group. I would set the primary group to staff, but like I don't remember, some domain general group was in there,
Yeah.
and I didn't find it until I looked at it.
For some reason, can be assigned a primary group in Active Directory.
Which ironically in a lot of the bound services ignores that.
Okay.
So like
It should. It doesn't make sense to have it anymore.
yeah, it doesn't. The legacy.
I'd be so tempted to delete the group.
Start over. Let's destroy our Open Directory server and just call it a day. All right. We're on slide 157 of 169, so we're getting close to the end. And a lot of this is just rhetoric at the end. How has the admin group here been affected? You'll notice if I list admin, DS Edit group admin, I just want to see what there is about this. This is another way of reading, just like you can do a DSCL to read, this is another way to read the admin group. I like this because it's a lot easier to read. It actually shows you who are members, and then it actually shows you some of the other record names in here as well. All right, so what else? Here's what you can do when you actually have directory users in your local admin groups. You can do things like give administrative privileges to people, so you can allow somebody to be an administrator on a Mac. You can also use this to control access to folders. This doesn't have to be admin standard user. This could be access to, believe it or not, this weird folder that you've got sitting at the root of your hard drive that you only want certain people to be able to access if they log in with their Active Directory credentials or Open Directory credentials. You can put ACLs on your folders and it reads those from your directory. So you can control folder access. You can do the same thing with network share permissions, screen sharing. If you want to give certain people the privilege of being able to use screen sharing across the network and look at somebody else's machine, they can do that if you allow them. The ability to add and remove printers probably is one of the most common reasons why you would ever do something like modify a local group, is to give people the ability to do something with printers, but not give them the privileges to do other things. SSH privileges. You can limit people using the directory accounts to certain SSH. Some people can get to SSH, others can't. I personally don't see limiting SSH being that helpful, but some people do. Obviously, you can control logon privileges to the computer. And again, if you look at your contacts list, you can do information lookups, especially for scripts. Again, this is where I use a lot of directory lookups for my Outlook Exchange script to pull out the email address, to pull out the username, to pull out any other information. I'm rewriting it now to actually fill out the me contact card. so that you've got everything filled out for you. And in a script, it takes a second. It takes a second to go all the way out to your server, come all the way back, and do stuff. So real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Here's some scripting examples. Don't worry about memorizing them, but here's what you can do. This first one, I want to know what my Active Directory NetBIOS domain name is. All I have to do is do a DSCL, and in this case, I'm not using interactive mode. I'm using DSCL as part of the command line. I just say DSCL, read Active Directory, read the subnodes in Active Directory, and print out that second part of the line. So subnodes would be the first part. What's that second part? That second part would be Talking Moose, my NetBIOS domain name. How do I get an email address out of Active Directory through a script? Again, I'm using DSCL to look it up. I say go read Active Directory, go into my NetBIOS domain, read all domains, read users, read whatever user I put in here, get just the email address property, and then when you return that, give me just the email address itself. That's what that awk $2 is saying. Give me just the second part. I don't need to know that this is the email address. And I can say my email address is mmoose@talkingmoose.net. In this case, this is a little bit different here. You can actually pipe a lot of this stuff into a plist automatically using DSCL. Why? A plist is an XML file. XML is parsable, very parsable if you're using something like Python or something like that. I could actually pipe out some information like first name, last name, email address, throw it into a plist, and then I could use plist buddy, another command line tool, to print just parts of that plist. And in this case, I'm saying just print out the first name from this plist, even though I've got all this other user information in here. And then I get Martin. And then finally, if I want to programmatically edit a group, and let's say I want to make all domain users members of LP admin. In other words, I want all domain users to be able to do stuff with printers, add printers, delete printers. I would just add the domain users group to LP admin. Boom. Only works on the network. If they leave the network, Active Directory does not come with them. Open Directory does not come with them. Only works on network. If it can't read the group, it can't do anything more with it. Well, yeah, that's on network. But with that, any questions?
When you're in DSCL interactive mode, is there any way to pipe out these unsupported commands? Like if you wanted to get a list of users who were just navigating around and you wanted to pipe to WC to see, how many user entries were actually output? Or
well, I'm sure you could, yeah. I mean, as long as
you in interactive mode, no.
Oh, I doubt it. I don't think so.
You'd have to do it the other way around in one string, call out, and then pipe.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
WC, give me a list, and
yeah. I was just thinking if it's going around
now.
in DSCL in interactive mode rather than having to exit out of it.
Would be nice.
Call it, yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Because it looks like
I'm going to agree with Grant on that.
Interactive is a little limited.
I think I've done it, but the only way I could do it was the backwards way.
Okay, gotcha.
You also can't, so you couldn't use interactive mode navigating into the users folder and then say, read all users, and spit out their email address and pipe into, you can't cap that thing out into a folder, but you could do it right from the command line. Show me all users, and you could use a little, simple regex to spit out every single user from this letter to that letter, and then cat out all the email addresses. There's your database of email addresses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the one command to take back with you, DSCL, all the others as far as being able to browse. So you can take that back and play. If you're a novice scripter, this is one of the ways that you're going to find interesting things that you might want to script all of a sudden.
And just taking it back to the very beginning, with kind of actually binding the computers to Active Directory or Open Directory as well. I know that for Casper with us, with our MDM, you can actually create configuration profiles. So we do want to go and do that, either install it on the computer and call it in profiles command, or install it directly.
Yeah, I'd much rather use it with a configuration profile myself.
Yeah, so that could be slick rather than scripting something out and calling it from there.
Yeah, definitely.
More and more companies nowadays have some kind of LDAP Active Directory thing that you can do a REST API or something on to pull the same data. Like we have Atlassian Crowd, so we can pull user information for that. Bryson uses Okta at Jam for AD, so other ways to skin a cat.
The advantage of doing it that way over exposing a read-only domain controller to the whole world.
That's interesting. Yeah, if you do have a read-only domain controller, that would be exposing everything, I'm guessing. I mean, if somebody found it, you would definitely want to limit that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, our crowd instance is internal only, so we wouldn't be able to access it internally. Okta is obviously software as a service.
Good to know. I have to ask Bryson more about that. I haven't used it. So I'm actually based out of Santa Monica. I live here in St. Paul, but this is where my company actually lives. We moved down the street not too far from here. But it's nice whenever I get to go back and visit, like around the holiday season. They have us out for the holiday party in December. Get to go see that. So that's it. At this point, we're about 5 minutes over. So real quick, let's get out of this. And I don't want you. We're done with you. Let's go back into our agenda and finish up. There, that's me. Announcements. Does anybody here have anything they want to say? I already know we've got a couple people. Whatever happened with you? Are you going to
No, I had couldn't get together.
All right, that's a shame. That's a shame. One of the cool things about this group is that a lot of folks have been able to at least, get opportunities about jobs. So I'd love to always be talking about job openings here. Does anybody? I know John, who's not here right now, he said that there is a position open over at Hopkins right now. I haven't looked at what that is. He has 2? Holy cow. So if you're looking for anything in the Hopkins area, around the Twin Cities, anybody else have any job openings with your company?
We actually have a job opening for a desktop support person that they're kind of looking for somebody that knows Mac stuff. So, somebody that needs a desktop support job.
Cool.
Where?
Merrill Corporation.
Merrill Corporation.
Oh. IL job.
So you can go to merrillcorp.com. Ask me more if you're interested.
And if you do have jobs to post, remember, you can post them on Jamf Nation. There's a really good user base there.
Definitely. Definitely. Hopefully everything got recorded tonight. That's what I usually use to make my notes, and I usually try to post the Meetup notes back on the website. If you were all signed up through Eventbrite, then I take that mailing list and I email out links once those notes are posted. So be looking for the emails on that. Any events that are coming up? We already know JNUC's coming up in October. Anybody else got anything? All right. With that, everybody's. What's that?
Yeah. The max is sad. Do I have to pay for it?
Oh, that would be nice. There's another one. So, have you heard about the MacaDuck? I call it MacaDuck. It's the UK. So, I guess in Great Britain, the Mac Admins UK meetup, or actually conference, not meetup. It's a conference. So we've got 2 over in Europe that we can all go to at some point. I would say road trip, but that's being purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
And would love for everybody to continue the conversation over across the street at Calhoun Square afterward. We're done. Thank you.